Neck-throughs, guitars, they're like a guy that won't have a beer with you.
I want to hear what's pushing the notes.
Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, and let's not forget Burger King.
I don't want to blow my knuckle out.
Stainless steel is the work of the devil.
These go to 11.
From the East Amplification Tone Labs in Baltimore, Maryland, it's the Amps and Axes Show. With your hosts, Jeff the Godfather of Low Wattage Amps Bober and Mick Marcelino.
Well, good day to you, Mr. Bober.
Hey, good day to you, Mr. Marcelino. How be you, my friend?
Oh, today's the day, brother.
It's a good one.
Today is the day. Let me tell you, we haven't had many opportunities. Well, we've had some very iconic,
yes, we have.
Historic guitar players on this show, and
yes,
today is no exception.
Right.
Man, how about this, huh? I'm just gonna, we'll just tease it. But anyway, we got to thank the fans because you guys have been answering the call. You've been spreading the word. It's the only way this thing works, man. Right. We rely on you guys to spread this word, and we need you. We need you. We need you to spread the word.
That's right. We try to do all the work here. We try to do all the heavy lifting, but man, you gotta throw it out there to your friends, Romans, countrymen,
yes,
relatives, even distant relatives.
Exactly.
Anybody else you could find on the street, just say, hey man, did you ever hear about this podcast? You gotta check them out.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you do, man, make sure that we feel that we kind of deliver a unique approach. So we would like you to tell people, hey, man, I only heard it here. I heard it here first. Yeah,
that's right. And first for us today.
Oh.
We spoke to this gentleman briefly at NAMM when we were out there in January.
Yeah,
and said, would you like to come on the show? He said, sure. Talk to my booking agent. So we spoke to her and got the whole thing taken care of. And lo and behold, he is here today.
That's
so
right.
We are going to take a pause for the cause and then come back with a man who's playing I fell in love with years ago in a little band called the Dixie Dregs.
Yes.
So we are going to bring you the one, the only Mr. Steve Morse.
Hey everybody, this is Rob Mount from Lou Graham, and you are listening to Amps and Axes and those bastards Jeff and Mick. Rock and roll.
Tom Wheeler was such a gentleman as the head of the magazine, and before that a writer. He wielded a lot of power, but he always gave every artist he interviewed great respect, and his artistry of writing mixed with his understanding of the guitar made him super easy to talk to, and a great writer. I think he along with Jim Crockett, they sort of stepped out of line of the most obvious selling things, and always included, sort of like the underdog artistic types. And I always admired him for that. I will miss him. And anyway, thanks for giving me a chance to say something.
Steve, you're more than welcome, man. Thank you very much for the very nice tribute to Mr. Tom Wheeler. He will be missed, man. He was a pioneer. Okay, and we are back as promised, because we keep our promises here, with the one, the only Mr. Steve Morse. Steve, how are you?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing great, man. Doing great.
Day.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a very good day. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today. We really do appreciate it. And
pleasure and honor, and especially thanks for doing this on behalf of the Dregs too.
Oh, for sure. Oh, we'll get into everything, I hope.
Now I have a story.
Okay.
Anytime that I can, I will tell you, life experience. I had the pleasure one time of attending one of your guitar demonstrations, or I don't know what it was at that time, but it was at Master Musicians in Glen Burnie, Jeff.
Wow, Maryland, yeah.
And it was Steve and Dave LaRue. And you guys were playing, I think, at the Ram's Head later that night as the trio that you took out.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember I was like, I had seen, some things of his rig at that time. And it was, you had all those volume pedals that would bring in the effects and everything. And, you would see that and I would think, okay, well, that's Steve's rig. That's how it's going to be. And it was Steve with his Music Man plugged into, I guess, like a delay pedal into a Soldano half stack. And that was it. And shocker, it still sounded like Steve Morse. And I just thought, well, that's an amazing guitar player because, your live rig back in the day, with all that stuff was huge. And, you had this mastery way of bringing in the effects and all, but when I just saw you and you were just plugged into that delay, I was like, well, there you go.
You go. Reinforce the fact that neither one of us would ever sound like Steve Morse, regardless of rig.
Exactly.
Well, the essence of my rig was that 95% of the time, all you're hearing is guitar plugged into the amp, into the dry amp, and then the effects just come in. Just like an engineer would add a little delay or a chorus or whatever, they only come in through the second amp, so that it doesn't change the dry amp. So the dry amp is going the whole night without changing, just like I was, pretty much just plugged in and playing at that particular clinic. Yep. So the sound is really the guitar going into an amp.
It was very cool, and I always, when I saw that, it took me the longest time, Jeff, to understand how that was all routed, because it was just Ernie Ball volume pedals that you would, and that's how, Steve was bringing in the wet, right? And I was like, how is this working? It's just mind blowing. But
it's
I will tell you,
quite possibly the first time I had seen a rig set up like that. Quite
it was
honestly.
very cool because they're always on.
Sure.
You just bring them in, But I tell you what I got from that seminar was I bought an Ernie Ball volume pedal, and the story is that you needed a chock for your van to pass inspection, and you didn't have one, so you grabbed one of the Ernie Ball volume pedals and you used that, and they passed it. And I was like,
what?
Well, if it holds his van, I know I can't break it.
Yeah, well, yeah, we had that too, but I had more than two, and we had the two spares that were easy to get to, and that was for a 26,000-pound truck too.
Wow. Well, there you go. But I'm gonna do what I always do with all of our guests, and we like to get a lot of history here, so. We're going to jump in the Wayback Machine, and we're going to ask you to take us back to where Mr. Steve Morse was born and raised, and how you got into music. What was the impetus, and how it took you to where you are today. So give us a little Steve Morse history.
Well, born in Ohio, then we moved to Tennessee, and during those years I was an infant, and I mainly learned the art of escaping from the crib, where my parents had to nail a cover over me at night.
Wow.
I had this fiercely independent streak. And we moved up to Michigan, and as a kid, I learned to ride a bike and do wheelies and, play a little bit of sports, not too much, but got into guitar as well as a little hobby, not too seriously. And had a band with my older brother, and several bands actually. And, just liked the sound of rock and roll. liked the feel of it. And, guitar is great because you could solo on it, you could play rhythm. And I'd heard some people playing fingerstyle on the guitar, even when I was up in Michigan. And I thought it's a very versatile instrument. So that's the way to go, rather than, like in the school band, I had to play clarinet because my brother played clarinet, and the school band leader, in the school knows that the younger brothers are going to inherit that instrument because parents don't have to rent it again.
Right.
And so guitar was what turned me on. Then we moved down to Georgia. Huge cultural shock. I just turned 13 and just getting into guitar playing a little bit more and more, and with the huge culture shock and sort of not belonging and being different than everybody, the music sort of became my refuge, and I really jumped into it and really got into, I guess if there had been the internet then, I could have learned all the stuff that I was trying to, I know I'm talking in fragments here, but I remember taping the radio because 1 hour a day on certain days they would play what they call psychedelic music. And I would tape those with my little cassette tape recorder and then try to, and it's all distorted and just nothing hi-fi about it at all. But I would try to, figure out some of the songs, and it'd be Deep Purple and Hendrix and Cream and stuff like that. All the cool stuff that a guitar player would want to do.
Now, did you have an acoustic guitar at that time, or had you already gotten into electric? I know you said you were in a couple of bands with your brother.
Yeah, that was with electric.
Okay.
The acoustic was the first year I took lessons. It was a rented acoustic guitar from the music store, and they didn't have a left-handed model, and I'm left-handed, so I learned to play right-hand. And being a logical person, I reasoned that it can't be that big of a deal since pianos are not left-handed or right-handed. They're just pianos. So I just thought, whatever I need to do, I'll learn to do it with either hand.
There's the secret sauce, Jeff.
Wow.
Because Rick Emmett is left-handed.
Oh, really?
And, yeah. And now, let me ask you, Steve, that helps with hammering on, right? You have your dominant hand is doing all the fretwork.
Back then, we had picks. We had picks that were triangular shaped, and they were about as big as a car.
Yeah, they were.
They were gigantic. And so your right hand was just really holding this pick, and if you were in the same time zone as the strings, you were going to hit the strings. So all the work was really with the left hand anyway at first, and especially on acoustic guitar. You had to have some. It was before they put light gauge strings on acoustics.
Yeah.
So being left-handed was actually an advantage at first.
Oh, look at that!
Wow, I would never in a million years think that it could be an advantage, but I guess if you're starting from scratch, it is all what you make it, right?
Yeah.
And you saved 10% on all your guitars while you were learning.
That's true.
Because back then it was like a 10% increase in the price. Remember? And
for a lefty.
Yeah. And a lot of times you couldn't even get them in left hand.
Yeah, they just didn't have it.
Yeah.
So it was not an option. But for a kid, if you're a kid and you lost a leg due to some early childhood accident, you would learn to do a lot of stuff without thinking about it. And I being left-handed was not really that was not a handicap at all. The only time I ever even noticed it was when I tried to get really good at classical guitar with the right hand, the very busy arpeggios, and of course with the fast picking.
Interesting.
Well, you did well.
Oh,
I can safely say that.
Thank you.
Just fine.
Very generous.
Do you remember what your first guitar and amp was? And do you still have them?
No, I don't have them.
Okay.
I didn't like them too much. I was grateful to have them, but I couldn't get the sound that I wanted out. And what I specifically missed was mid-range. The guitar was a a Fender Music Master where the pickup was near the middle, so it had no highs and not any fatness that you'd associate with the neck position, either, or roundness. It would just kind of blah. And the first amp was my dad put a RCA jack on a radio. That was the first amp. Then he let me, and my dad was great. Both my parents were supportive, even though they hated, the loud music and stuff. He let me take his Heathkit amp, which was before stereo. We had just a single speaker. And the Heathkit amp he had made as a college student from tubes and everything, and it was just bare chassis. He let me take that out and hook it up to some speakers that my friend had, and then we would go to have a jam session like that. And here's this 2 amplifier just sitting on the grass, with extension cord going to it.
Nice.
That is pretty cool.
The first actual amp I had was a Fender Princeton, and that was a big ticket purchase. And the only effect it had was tremolo.
Right.
But no matter what I did, I just couldn't get the sound that I heard on records. And the Chuck Berry, the Beatles, any of that fatness, and especially mid-range, that you would associate with a humbucking pickup. And if not a humbucking pickup, at least with, anyway, it was just something that I couldn't quite get there. And later on, the next amp I got was a Vox Buckingham, and that had a middle-range boost on one of the channels. Middle-range boost with 3 different positions. That was my secret weapon.
Nice.
So I made a deal with my parents for a 0-interest loan that involved a lot of years of, painting a house and doing the lawn mowing, of course. And I got a Stratocaster. So a Stratocaster with the middle range boost was as close as I got until I figured out that I needed, combinations of pickups.
And that's where the Telly came in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you still have that guitar?
No, I gave it to Rod's wife when she was still alive. We always had the guitar around, when I met Rod and his wife, and we were down in music school, and I remember we were at a gig, and she said, I love seeing that guitar. If you ever, if you die, you must will that to me. And so I said, well, I don't need to die to do that. So I went home and sent it to her.
Wow.
And that's the guitar that the Music Man, your signature model, was made from, right?
Yes. Basically, let's take all the good things about that and refine the things that could be better.
That is so cool.
And that's exactly what they did.
Wow. Now, did you, I want to find out how we got to the Dregs at some point, and then what kind of gear did you have when you started the Dregs? Was it the Strat? Was it the modified Telly, or was it the Telly that you modified? But how did you and the guys wind up getting together? Where did you put the Dregs together? Okay,
well, it was really Andy West. We had a band called Dixie Dregs, which was funny. We were like a prog rock. We were doing covers of, all different kinds of heavy music, and even a James Taylor tune that our singer liked, and then doing original stuff, And we'd play dances, and people hated us. we were based in Augusta, Georgia.
It's a sign of a great band.
Yeah, we'd open up for some shows, and people were kind of confused, but we got a mixed reaction. And whenever we played a function, we got a universally horrible reaction. But when we played concerts, it was going kind of good. Anyway, we never got anywhere. The band broke up at the end of the summer. Andy and I were the only ones left, and he was just joking around and said, well, I guess we're the Dregs of this. What do you want to do?
Wow.
I said, call it the Dixie Dregs instead of Dixie Red. And we just laughed. And back then, that was the only proving ground. There was no test marketing. If we said something and it made us laugh, it was in, So that
How cool is that?
I mean, why not, man? It's your band, and you might as well enjoy the name of it. It's nice if it means something to you, like an internal kind of joke thing. That's always fun.
Yeah, our first concert was at the college, our first serious concert, and we had a different drummer, Gilbert Freyer, who was just very patient, because we spent a lot of times with sounds and everything. But during that concert, Andy would talk, and I would go and set up these 2 tape recorders about 10 feet apart, and the one reel was on the first tape recorder. It was recording, and then instead of a take-up reel on that recording, it was draped across the ground to the other tape recorder pretty far away, and being played back from there. And then I brought that playback through a mixer.
Holy crap.
And started feeding that back in. So Andy's voice was layering and layering. So there was suddenly more than one of Andy talking, but from something he'd said 10 or 15 seconds ago. And I kept layering that in. And then we had some oscillators, and we were like making some electronic music. And then we break into one of the tunes that was like, well, the Odyssey was one of the tunes I'd written for that trio, and later became a Dregs, 5-piece Dregs piece. But I had the Telecaster with the humbucker pickups, and Ampeg V4, 2 Ampeg V4s. And for delays, I had a Echoplex, and the Echoplex was the reason I had to have separate wet and dry, because there was so much hiss. If you put the Echoplex on the input of a high gain amp, or a high, anything with the input turned up, you'd hear hiss. This way, I could put the Echoplex through the second amp, and then I use a volume pedal, actually for my steel guitar, and control that. You could set the Echoplex just like many delays to 100% wet. So you need very little of it to get the effect. And I could turn down the treble on that second amp to where the hiss was not so noticeable, but the delay was. And plus I could shut it off and blend it in with the pedal.
That is so
wow.
Cool.
That's, it's, I love your experimental aspect of things. I mean, the thing with the 2 tape recorders 10 feet apart, that's Les Paul shit right there. That is so cool, Yeah. And then figuring out how to use a noisy effect effectively, and man, and V4s, man, I used to love V4s. And talk about mid-range.
Yes. That's the name of the game. The Ampeg V4 had 3 different mid-range settings, and it was almost like an active EQ. You could crank it up so much that you could sound like, one of John Lennon's Rickenbackers, that real, or the, the beginning of a Kinks tune, you could get almost any kind of shade of mid-range with it.
That is so
There was actually a boost and cut. It was it was an active circuit, and you set it to the 1K, the middle setting, and turn up the mid-range. You could get any note of feedback. It was just so great. I love those amps back in the day. You can't play them now because they're too damn loud.
Yeah, that was the problem, getting a power soak that wouldn't burn up. But Andy and I had a ring modulator at one point, and we both wanted to use it. So we made a matrix of wires into a pan pedal so that either one of us could access the ring modulator. We had bypass switches. And this was all done with just, without much knowledge of ground loops and hum control and where to shield and where not to shield. So we had some hum issues, but it did work.
Wow.
But and this is the part that is just amazing, right? You're doing all this, but you're not a crappy musician. This isn't like, some punk band that's just making noise and you guys just figured out how to make some modulation stuff. You're an incredible prog band.
Right.
You're playing some of the most technical stuff like ever written for guitar, and then you're on the backside and you're going, well, if we do this that's amazing to me. That's like that's a left-right side working very well.
Yeah. Twigs used to say that about me, but back then there just wasn't much else to do. We didn't have the entertainment choices that people have now.
No, that's true.
And we certainly didn't have the gigs. So between gigs, it was all about, what can we do to make it more interesting for the next thing? And, I was always thinking about playing, because I was studying classical guitar, how to make that loud enough to work. And when the Les Paul solid body classical came out, it was like, all right, here we go. The sound wasn't exactly like a classical, but it allowed me to do that. And then later on, I even had a synthesizer with that, which didn't turn out as awesome as I heard in my mind. But Annie and I both were early adopters of the 360 systems pitch to voltage converter that would allow our instruments to control a synthesizer.
Was that box that used to be on your guitar, that little black thing behind the bridge?
Yeah. Well, the one that was on the guitar with the box was a Shadow. More sophisticated and more modern than that. But the very early one was a gigantic box, on the floor, going to a Mini Moog, which sat on a army trunk.
Gotcha.
Wow. It's just. It's just so cool to hear how people experimented with the technology or lack thereof early on, and just like took it to places that maybe it wasn't designed to go or people didn't think about it going. But man, I mean, that's like somewhere between Les Paul and Tom Schultz kind of.
Oh yeah.
Electronic skullduggery, kind of thing. It's so cool, man. So I mean, Steve, when was this? When this was obviously very early Dregs. About what time was that year wise?
Oh, very early 70s. And like in 73, I think Annie and I did, the actual concert, with people coming and pretty much a good reception. Although one guy came up and said he would never ever go to any, or maybe he said his girlfriend would never ever go to another show of ours, ever. It was like a lot of emphasis on ever.
I had a club owner one time tell me that about my band. Never coming back. Ever.
Apparently, yeah, you can't please everybody.
No, you can't. So at that point, was it pretty much an original? The Dregs was an original project, or were you mixing 100%. Covers? 100%.
Well, let me take that back. We did it as a three-piece. No, I don't think we did. Well, wait a minute. Once we added Mark Parrish, we did Beethoven's Ninth. The some of the sections that had been done in Clockwork Orange, and we also did the Funeral for Queen Anne, that was also a quote in that Stanley Kubrick used, that was done by Walter Collins, and a few classical things, but not too much straight ahead covers. Later on with the Dregs, we did Jessica, Peaches on Regalia, so Jessica was by Elmer Brothers, that got a lot of airplay, and people like that, and Peaches on Regalia, another instrumental by Frank Zappa, and I think I adapted a couple Renaissance tunes to the band, so we did some covers, and we tried to do Mob Ishta whenever we thought we'd get away with it, but some people just hated us doing covers like that.
I'm assuming when you said Renaissance, you were talking about songs from the Renaissance era and not the band Renaissance?
Thank you, yes. It's, if I was a writer, I always have to go back and proofread what I write, because, you don't notice the fact that could be taken more than one way. That Renaissance era music.
Yeah. No, and it's no problem, because I was a fan of the band Renaissance as well. I remember when they were out and touring, but another kind of prog band. I was when prog started to hit, it was like, wow, this this is really interesting. This is really cool. This is really challenging. I love this stuff, you know. And I think you either loved it or you didn't, you know. But I mean, the hardcore rockers, it's like, oh, you know, what is this? But I loved prog. So. Oh
yeah, and I mean, you've seen all the bands that have, gotten influenced by that, and I know that you guys did something with I guess you did a small tour or something with Dream Theater, and then next thing you know, John is. He adapted Steve's, the volume pedal thing to bring in the effects, have a wet and dry rig. And, you can totally hear that influence in some of his writing. Of course, the sounds are very different, but it's definitely there, and that's a pretty cool thing because there's a lot of notes in that camp.
John is taken that his ability to play to the next plateau, I could see glimpses of that plateau, but I never could quite live there like he can.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No, I do know about that. I'm very, being very factual.
Well, I mean, just because you are probably looking at it from strictly the technicality aspect of it, but man, the first time I heard you play, I heard the Dregs. The guitar play was mind-boggling. Yeah. It truly was. It was its own thing, Steve. I mean, that was you. Nobody else was playing like that.
Well, part of that was I was always trying to do stuff that would fit on my guitar, that would challenge me on the guitar. And so it turns out that after I would finish writing a tune, I already knew it. And it was perfectly comfortable for me. So it must be just as easy for everyone else.
Well, the one thing that I noticed, and I'm so glad you cleared it up with the whole mid-range thing, is that your guitar, of course, your style punches right through. I can hear it and go, oh, that's definitely Steve. But the sound of it it's very violin-like, and that is a unique thing because you don't really hear that, and you really haven't heard that from a lot of different guys. But that frequency, it just works. And then when I have your, it's on VHS. I don't have anything in my house that can play it, but I have your instructional video. And I adapted your style with, you said, look, when you go in the higher range, you want to get more into the neck pickup so it's not like biting your head off. And then when you go in the lower range, you go to your treble pickups. Now, of course, your guitar has a huge range of tones because of how many pickups and switches and the way that you can switch it in and out and all. But I was like, it made so much sense then because I was always like, I wanted to get that little bit of violin, Yngwie Malmsteen kind of, I don't know how to describe sound, but, that neck pickup thing. And I didn't know where it worked, and I knew that. Then I figured out the guitar, over time. But then I saw your video, and I was like, "Oh, that's how he's doing it," because your tone didn't get like harsh or anything when you were playing in the upper register. It kind of balanced throughout the whole neck, and I was like, "Oh, there's the thing. Maybe I got to reach down and flip that switch."
that was the point. Those two pickups. The one by the bridge and one by the neck. And that's also why my guitars don't have 24 frets, because that pushes that neck pickup a little bit away from the sweet spot.
Ah,
makes
interesting.
Sense. Yeah.
So you do notice a difference with that?
Oh yeah.
Nice.
It's sort of a very narrow range right there. And that's why when you play pretty much every other guitar, you won't get quite that much of a singing. It'll be a different kind of singing, and certainly more high end.
Yeah, because your sound, you could tell there was a lot of game behind it. But again, it's one of those great sounds that's just super articulate, and it has to be for your style.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like it's a beautiful tone, it's a singing tone, but it's articulate, and you can hear all the notes and the transition between them. It's not slurred or anything, and I'm sure a lot of that is your ability to play the guitar. But the sound that you came up with in order to articulate that in the tone structure that you wanted it's really great, man. Like I said, again, I go back to the early Drake stuff. It's like, wow, it just sounds so good, and you can hear everything that he's doing. It's so great.
I wanted to tell you just one other thing I learned off of that video was inside and outside picking, and I'd never heard of anything like that. I didn't even really think of it, but you broke those mechanics down, and I was like, oh man, if I do it this way, it's much more efficient than if I go the other way. And then Steve would do these exercises where he would do it the hard way to get your hand used to going, to give you that avenue, so you didn't have to, if I remember correctly, it was just how you started off. So if you started off a certain way, there was a good chance that you would be, doing these huge leaps between strings. But he came up with these exercises that showed you how to do it. And I tell you what, that's some hard stuff. But once you get it down, it kind of becomes second nature. And I thank you for that, because there was a couple times when I noticed that, when you get off, when your numbers aren't matching and you're jumping to the next string or skipping a string, the efficiency kind of goes away sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's the bottleneck, and that's one of my points is practice the weak spots. You don't have to practice the things you can already do. If something is slowing you down or making it sloppy in one section, then I usually just develop an exercise to address that technique. And a lot of times it is like, a down pick on the G string, a up pick on the D string.
Yep. Yeah.
Huh.
That was good stuff, man.
Yeah.
We'll have to get a VCR, Jeff, and I'll show you that instructional
I'd love
video.
to see it. We'd love to see it. I want to move on from Dregs onto what came next. But I'm just curious about the guitar, like the Telly. Do you remember all that was in that guitar? The way you had everything modified. Can you just give us a little insight on that?
Okay, I started as a black stock Telly, but it had a 335 pickup on the neck position, and then had the normal Telly, the real feedbacky one with that gigantic chrome apparatus that also contained the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with, we were just developing strings, or Ernie Ball was just developing the strings that would, the slinkies. Mm-hmm. So the third string was now an unwound string, whereas when the Telecaster was developed, most of the time the third string would be wound.
Mm-hmm.
So right between the third and the fourth string, that the bridge piece needed to have a different distance for the D and the G. So instantly, I didn't like the Telecaster from that standpoint. I couldn't get the intonation right. Because I had real skinny G string and a relatively fat wound D string.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that had to go. Then the next thing was the bridge pickup would feed back, at high volume. And as a teenager, there was only one way to play the guitar. So I just decided, once I looked at the back and saw where the screws for the necks were, my Telly had a maple neck, and I just didn't like the maple neck, because when your hands are sweaty, you just couldn't get a good grip to grab the strings. So I was just instantly get my dad's toolbox, start, get into screwdrivers, found one that fit perfectly, took the neck off, put it on. It didn't quite work because it turned out there was a little shim needed, but all right, I shimmed it, finally got it right, and I was like, okay, now this telly feels great. Where the cutaway was, where your right arm would sit on a Stratocaster, I didn't like that so much because I played acoustic guitar also, and it put my arm down too far away from the plane of the front of the instrument. So I said, this telly's great. It was nice light wood and everything. I said, let's make it work. This thing is flat. It's a canvas waiting to be. So I stripped it down, got the black paint off, and put some varnish from the hardware store on it. Spar varnish, I think it was, for the spar of a sailboat. And
wow.
I got the hammer and chisels and started carving away. First thing, take off the bridge, downtown at the music store, I got a tunematic bridge, and pretty much measured the distance from the nut to the 12th fret, and from there I did the same distance to where the center of the bridge should be.
Okay.
That's just mathematically that made sense to me. And sunk the spindles down in there and got that going. And of course later on realized I should have put a ground wire. And later on I did add a ground wire, but it was external. And when the strings came up through the bottom of the tele, they made too sharp of a turn to go over the tunematic.
Okay.
So what I did was I got a trapeze tailpiece from the pawn shop downtown, and they had like a pile of parts and stuff. And so I used that at first. It was a 12-string tailpiece, and it was working okay, but it wasn't giving me quite enough tension over there. So I just drilled a couple holes in the tailpiece. There was a bar of metal there. Drilled a couple holes and put some wood screws and pushed that straight down. So the trapeze part was kind of redundant. That went where the guitar strap would be. It was just basically a bar of metal.
I'm looking at this thing now. And, I'm
Oh.
actually looking at the pictures of it, and I can actually see those screws.
Yeah, cool.
And you made a huge pick guard that covered all the, I guess, because there was a number of pickups. It was exactly what you have on your signature model, 2 humbuckers and 2 singles, right?
Yeah.
And
one of the things that I did was to take the lipstick pickup once I put the tunematic on, carve a big old hole for a Fender humbucking pickup they just come out with. Put that in, and just screwed it into the wood with some shims till I got the right amount. And then later tried springs underneath the screws, underneath the pickup rather. Wow. Then the lipstick pickup went next to that, which I thought would be a better place than, it was originally on the neck. And I'd still had that from the original owner of the guitar. Then the 3-way switch had an extra capacitor in it for some reason that I just can't fathom. I guess to get a real dark jazz tone or something. Yeah. So I took out that capacitor and I kept the I think 0.05 microfarad one, and that turned out to be great with the pickups I already had. So I had the basics of my sound already. Now the space for the last pickup was I wanted to put one of my Strat pickups in, but I didn't want to tear up my Strat because I already put the maple neck on it, and said, well, I could trade this for something that I could use. And sure enough, I did trade it for a steel guitar.
Oh wow!
Anyway, I didn't have a pickup at the time, so I tried a succession of different pickups. One was a Hexa Phonic pickup with 6 different pickups built into one. Jesus. And it was made by Rex Bogue. And and speaking of the pick guard, Bert at Bert's Guitar Shop in Atlanta did make that for me. I played it for quite a while without a pick guard because that was a sort of painstaking process that I didn't even bother with.
It was a big piece of plastic on there.
Yeah. I tried different pickups in that where the slant pickup would be, and finally ended up with the slant pickup, and that's why there's an extra piece of plastic there covering the whole of what used to be a hexaphonic. The idea with the hexaphonic is that I could have each string go into a different amplifier.
Jesus.
Wow.
That is so cool.
As if the guitar wasn't complex enough. Now it needs like 7 jacks on it.
Now, I have to ask you, because I've heard every argument known to man about pickups. And you will have these guys that say, I run one P90 because I don't want any magnets, any extra magnets pulling the string and not making it vibrate. You couldn't really park much more in there,
right?
As far as magnets go. But your guitar rings for like a week. So is that just killing their mindset of what they come up with, or did you ever notice anything where the strings didn't ring as long?
Sure, and everything's a compromise. And we think about it. If you want your car to drive straight with the least amount of friction, then you would have tires at 90 psi with no camber, no caster, and
just go.
And also it wouldn't turn.
Exactly,
and you wouldn't get good traction. So if you want just sustain, then do whatever you need to do. But if you want to play all night long and do every song and every sound you can come up with on one guitar, you have to think compromise in certain ways of design. And for me, the best situation is to pull the single coil pickups back away from the strings. That accomplishes several things. One, less magnetic pull on the strings, and two, when I go to those pickups, like say if I'm at 10 with a humbucker on the volume knob of my guitar, and I go to 3 or 4 and switch to one of those single coil pickups that are farther away from the strings, I got way less gain, I get a cleaner sound, and the single coils give me a little bit more high end that I would lose from the apparent loss of high end when you get out of the distortion zone where you're doing square edge waves, cut off clipped waves.
Nice. Well, there you go.
Wow. Man, it's
just like blown away.
So much thought went into that, and it's obviously all because you really wanted out of one instrument to cover a whole lot of ground sonically. And it's like, what can I do to this guitar to get this out of it now, and then this out of it now? That's just amazing. That's fantastic. I love it.
And then the best part
as a tinkering guy, I love it.
And then the best part is, Jeff, is when and we've had the pleasure to see Steve. We saw him at the Ernie Ball booth playing with the other fellows, and it's like, oh, that isn't a lap steel. That's just Steve being able to play his fretted instrument with his fingers like a lap steel guitar. That is some of the most amazing things I've ever witnessed that you do, Steve, where if you closed your eyes, you'd be like, no, that's a lap, pedal steel, that's a guy sitting down. And it's like, no, that's just an Ernie Ball Music Man 6-string and Steve's hands.
Steve behind the wheel.
Using it's a trick that where you do bend at least one of the strings, and in some cases you can bend both, and of course, and don't have the pick strike with the volume pedal on, I wasn't using the volume pedal, I was using the volume on the guitar.
Yes, do like pre bends and things, and then fade the volume up, and
it isn't hard enough. We had to.
That was a stage full of some pickers, man. I got to tell you, that was a fun little show right there.
Did you hear that young guy with
Hunter Hayes?
Hunter Hayes,
unbelievable.
Yeah, that kid can. I tell you what, that was like whoa, because
hey man, Sterling was holding his own too.
His solo's great. He's got just tons of raw talent. Everybody in his family, and just had a different career path that kept him from practicing every day and all that stuff. But he just has the feel for music, and Ernie Ball was the same way.
How many years have you known that family?
35.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
That's a long time. All right, so let's go from Dregs to whatever came next and led you to, finally the Deep Purple family. How long did the Dregs go officially? And they're still gonna go, but how long before you moved on to something else?
I think it was about 82 or 83 when we broke up, and I went to run heavy machinery and cutting fields with my tractor and stuff like that, trying to make a living.
Wow.
And it was, it's good, honest work and everything, but it's really hard to make a living doing that, because you have to jump into it just like you would into your music, and really get to know everything in order to possibly stay ahead of all the expenses and maintenance and everything.
Wow. So
Phil Walton had helped me make sure I was out of the record contract, because he was interested in possibly getting back in the music business, and he thought it would be possible for me to do my own thing. And I thought too that there has to be a way of just totally organically starting over from nothing. I mean, we were just dead broke, and I just thought, I know these two guys that would do it for not much money, and would be good, good enough where they could play anything. And I just worked up some tunes with them, and we went out and played for a percentage of the door, a few places, and made enough money to make it back. And just like the Dregs, we just started, and because of the Dregs, we had sort of a little foot in the door.
Okay.
And it didn't take much in the way of an audience, to survive, because it was, the expenses were less. And then that grew into sort of a thing. Although, I don't know, I'm just not meant to be in the music business in many ways, because things just frustrate me to the point where I just sort of, I don't know, I just can't deal with it. Mm-hmm. But I did, when we started recording, it was Rod Morgenstein on drums, and Jerry Peake at first, and then later Dave Rue, and then Van Romaine. So everybody going through their little journeys and had different things happening. And it never really exactly died, but we had run around and done our circuit of gigs, and never really gotten into the European audience too much, although we did do one really cool run in Germany that turned out well.
Huh.
And Kansas sort of came around. That it wasn't them coming to me saying, "Do you want to be in Kansas?" It was, "Hey, we're getting together with Steve Walsh finally, and we're going to reunite. Kerry doesn't want to do it. He lives in Kansas. Do you want to come and hang out and see about writing something?" Yeah. Because, Kansas was one of the original prog bands that, I felt such a great kinship with, and was friends with all of them, because they were based in Atlanta for a long time.
Man.
So the Kansas thing kind of stopped my trio from doing very much for while I was doing that. Then I got sidetracked after that and got into being an airline pilot for a little while. Again, not to quit the music writing or performing, but just to quit the music business. And it turned out that it was a little harder than I thought. It was a great lesson for a young guy to go through, to learn what it takes to be a guy that wears a uniform, and the amount of work it takes to earn that uniform. It was a great lesson.
Now, was this jet engine, a lot of passenger kind of planes, or was it smaller stuff?
Sure, it's turboprop, 31 passenger.
Could you imagine getting on a plane and going, Hey, is that Steve Morse?
Yeah, your captain today is Steve Morse.
Like,
how
cool is
not
this?
The captain, I was first officer. I got lots of great flying experience, but actually to get the job back then, it was a big deal. They were, you had to jump through a lot of hoops and be experienced.
Yeah.
And it's a different climate now, but back then it was a big deal to get the job, and so it was a huge, I don't know, it was a huge milestone for me.
Wow. About what time? What year was this?
86, maybe.
Okay.
Now, just to add a side note, because I don't know if Steve knows this or not, but we are very close friends with Gretchen Menn.
She's great.
And, and then when she told us she was an airline pilot, I was like, what did I miss? I'm like, this is I've heard this story that there's some guitar players that are airline pilots. And I'm like,
right.
And her story, it was so funny because she said, I remember what she said because we interviewed her the second time. We were asking her about it, and she said she felt like she was stealing a job from somebody that wanted to be an airline pilot. And she said when they would come in, she would grab her classical guitar and she'd be sitting there writing music or playing. And she goes, I just didn't feel like I was, part of that crew, so she stopped doing that. And I was
she comes from a family of extreme high achieved, very gifted.
Do you think?
Family.
Oh my God!
Yes, her dad, Don Menn, was one of the head guys and a guitar player too.
Yeah,
yes,
extremely nice guy too.
Yeah, she has been nothing but great to us. So she has gotten, probably what would you say, Jeff? 20 people.
Guests
for us,
probably so. She's very big. We're I don't know if we're as big a fan of hers as she is of ours,
Exactly.
And she's like, "Oh man, you guys got to be on the show. It's great. You got to be on the show."
Yeah, she can do anything. I mean, really, just one of those people where you talk about having it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's go back to Kansas for a bit. Like how
did 2 albums and 3 or 4 tours, I think. And anyway, I sort of
did you do a lot of European touring with Kansas at all? No. Wow.
No, I did some after I was out, and they said, well, okay, you can do your opening thing of your music as the opening band, and then it'll be us. So I did do a couple of German tours, I think, with them. But that was kind of like after I started the airline pilot thing. And the airline pilot thing was pretty brief because I reached an impasse where, I was strictly interpreting the rules I was given, and they sort of changed them, and I had a gig booked where they said, you now have to sub for somebody on this day. I said, well, no, I got a hard schedule. I took the crappiest schedule, which included Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and New Year's. Ooh. In order to have these days off. They said, no, well, too bad you're drafted. You have to do that. I said, well, I can't. I mean, you changed the rules.
Wow.
I'm a very finite person when it comes to, time and space. You can't be in 2 places at once.
Right. And there's never enough time.
Yeah, I wasn't going to cancel a gig.
Sure.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Back to reality. And then Gary Roston called me and said, come sit in with us. Leonard Skinner's getting back together. We're going to be at the Omni. Come and sit in with us. We're recording it. And that was just a great moment of, sort of fellowship and bringing me back into the music business.
Wow.
I didn't even know that.
I didn't either. I had no idea you did anything.
They did a live album they did called Southern by the Grace of God. I think that's the name of it. And they
holy crap.
Give me back my bullets. Give me back my bullets. That's me playing one of the solos.
Wow. How freaking cool is that, man?
I had no idea.
God bless Southern Rock once again.
Look at that.
There was so many people around Atlanta, We'd see them and like I said, get the guys in Kansas, 38 Special, Atlanta Rhythm Section. Oh, just and the Allman Brothers, of course.
Yeah.
all around that Atlanta area. A lot of music, and Mother's Finest too. Great,
wow,
great funk rock band.
Yeah.
Well, now you just now my mind is completely blown.
I really didn't know about that part.
Yeah.
So, did you? Were you? Go ahead, Mick.
I was just going to say, what was when I heard that you were doing the Deep Purple thing, I was like, wait a minute, Steve Morse is in Deep Purple. It kind of threw me a little bit because of the prog rock thing, and they're more straight ahead kind of, harder rock. And I was like, well, I guess if anybody could play anything, it would be Steve.
Well, but then again, the Purple thing, a la Blackmore, was very heavily classically influenced.
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
So that leans a little more towards the prog than just straight ahead rock and roll.
Yeah.
Certainly more so than Skinnerd.
The Skinnerd thing is mind blowing.
That's wild. Were you with them for a while, or
with Skinnerd?
Yeah.
Oh no, we did that thing, and then they a little bit later they invited me to about 10 shows to kind of hang out with them and jam and sort of, I think, just testing the waters to see what kind of guitarists would fit with them, to take the place. Well, they were used to having 3 guitar players.
Yeah.
And they were kind of just reforming the band, and I really wanted to be in a band where you could improvise a lot of solos, and I think at the time they wanted to, pretty much reproduce the recorded versions.
Kind of stay true to it, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a very structured band live. You can tell.
Yeah, and on the other hand, Purple is whatever you feel like doing, man. Just let us know.
Really?
Oh,
yeah,
so
and
cool.
I instantly had an incredible rapport with John Lord. He had great ears, just like a jazz player. He could hear anything I did, and he could understand anything I did, and he and Roger really loved to just experiment with stuff in the writing phase. So our first album we did together, Perpendicular, was just a joy.
Awesome album,
and similar,
by the way.
Similar to the first album I did with Kansas, the Power album. It was just extremely organic. Everybody responded to the music and no preconceived notions.
That's really cool. So how and when did the Deep Purple thing happen?
Well, actually, it was a little bit of a surprise to me. I just got a call from my manager. It was about it was in '93, but we talked about, I don't know how these guys are playing. I'd never seen them live. Heard the recordings and liked the band a lot, but I just don't know. Who knows? These guys could be washed up, living off their name or whatever. And I was fairly cynical about that, having seen lots of concerts, of bands. So we agreed to do 4 shows. They agreed to do 4 shows, and we'd see what happens. It took many months before those shows were booked, and we could finally do it. So there's 94 before I actually met all of them. They photoshopped a band photo. Me and Roger and I had visited each other. Roger was living in the States then, and attached that to the other 3 guys who had their picture taken in England. And so that became our promo picture.
Wow.
So anyway, at the first gig, I met everybody, like, cool, they were in a dressing room kind of set up with some equipment. We're going to go through the set and jam. So we start off just jam, and I play something, John Lord's got it. He spits it right back to me. I mess around with it, give it back to him. He catches everything I did and then takes it further. And I'm just smiling. The feel is so great. It was we were just happy, It was just a great jam band. Anyway, we did the show, and it went really well. One spot I missed because I learned from some tapes, and I thought that there was a certain number of bars, but it was a cue, and so I missed the cue. And Gillen comes up to me. The band just kind of breaks it down. The rhythm's going on, and it's kind of a breakdown. I said, "That's really good, Steve. Now, what do you say we do a little something like this?" And he gives the cue. And now that could have been a train wreck, but just the way they all handled it with it, just kind of a little grin, and here we go, right back into it.
So where was this first gig?
Mexico City, which is a gigantic megapolis. It's square in the center of Mexico. It's a huge city. Then sold out Coliseum, and it was intense.
And there was no rehearsal before that?
No, we played in the dressing room.
Right, other than the dressing room.
Yeah.
I freaking love that.
But don't forget, they had already had a sub in '93 with Joe Satriani finishing the tour. Where Rich had quit. So they knew that, hey, this is, if we get a pro guy to come, he can just come in and do this. We'll give him a tape. Give him a tape of Richie playing and a tape of Joe playing. And he can figure out what he wants to do. But and that was my instructions. Just be there and be ready to play.
How cool is that? And
it takes a little bit of faith, tapes aside, it takes a little bit of faith, it really does. Because, you said you had met John before, I guess, so you guys probably hit it off. Roger.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys probably hit it off. But, you don't know how everybody is going to be on a personal level, So, but I guess that felt really good because it felt good musically, yeah.
Well, that's why we did 4 shows. It was just in 4, you can work with anybody for 4 days.
True.
Yeah.
But it turned out within just the jam part of the rehearsal was everybody was laughing. We're all happy. It's like, this feels pretty good.
You could just start to feel it gel.
Yeah. I just had no idea what I was getting in for in terms of the sheer number of gigs that they wanted to do.
Well, it's funny is my friend at my job, he was actually my boss. He said to me, he goes, "Have you heard of new Deep Purple?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Steve Morse is playing for him." And I'm like, "Steve Morse is playing for Deep Purple?" And he goes, "Yeah, you got to hear this album, Perpendicular." He gives it to me. Ted the Mechanic is the first song. And I'm like, holy hell. Like, it was like they just gave you the reins. I mean, it was like, and what a great song. And I was just like, man, that whole album is awesome. And it had that neat, it's Deep Purple, but it's not you trying to be Richie Blackmore. Right. And it fit. And I was like, that's cool. Because, a lot of times, they'll get the hired gun guy and he'll try to do or write in the vein of that person. But no, it was like, you can tell that they just said, you be Steve. And boy, did you.
That's cool.
Roger was probably the one that got me suggested to them the most. The guys had heard one of the Dregs tunes as an opener for a BBC radio program for years. Oh, I didn't know that that Take It Off the Top was a theme for one of the radio shows that was on for 15 years. And then during the time that they were recording in Florida, Roger had come to one of our trio shows, the Steve Morse Band. So he knew what I was about, and he thought, well, this guy is weird enough to where this could work.
I would substitute the word talented, but okay.
Well, I think that they wanted somebody with a real strong sense of identity that shares a lot of the influence that the band did, and rather than somebody trying to copy Richie.
Yeah, that is really cool.
And you've been in the band longer than any other guitar player, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Now that's cool.
Yeah. Now, of course, that rig was definitely different than the Dregs thing, and I don't know what the rig was for Skinner, but that was kind of a short-lived thing. But I know you're doing Engels with Purple, right? Has that always been the case, or did you move from something to that during that band, during your tenure with them?
Yeah, I started with the PV5150s,
okay.
and as you know, it's a good sounding amp, and it's a different sound than a Marshall, but they wanted a little bit more clarity. When after we were doing the first record, we were doing a show somewhere and we couldn't carry our equipment, and we ended up renting, I think, a Marshall 2000 with the 3-channel version, and everybody said, "Oh, we like this a lot better." So okay, whatever, we'll start using that. So I bought one, was using that, and along the way, I ended up, when my guitar tech Scoot was leaving, and Michael Berger came in, a German guy, and he was very knowledgeable about amps and equipment. He said, "You should try this amp. Let me bring it to you." And he brought an Engel amp, and I said, "Well, it's got a real sweet, beautiful tone. There's some things that I'm missing, though." And so the next thing I know, he brings the Designer, and then the next time he brings a Designer with a breadboard where I can, set EQ points, while I'm playing through the amp on the, kind of outside the amp.
Wow. And
over the course of a few weeks or months, I can't remember, we mapped out a sort of signature head, and I just thought it sounded great. So that became what I used with Purple, and the sound man and the guys thought it sounded great because it's very clear, but at the same time has plenty of a sort of a liquid sound. Really, that super high end kind of Class A tube, super sweet distortion.
Nice and fluid.
Yeah.
Nice.
And here's the thing. This is the one thing that I took away from the guitar clinic that I attended, that you gave. You are true to the equipment you use. And you said that even. You said, "I will not endorse anything that I don't use." And that proof is totally in the pudding, because you have been using, Ernie, that blue Ernie Ball guitar, your signature model. I saw the rig rundown with Premier Guitar, and when you said there's been 10 sets of frets in that thing,
whoa,
it blew my mind, first off. And then, I remember during the clinic, you were still, not at the clinic, but you were talking about the equipment. You were still using, it was a PV head. It was, what was it called? It was a 120 watt or a 60 watt. It had a couple numbers or a couple letters, and then like 120 or 60. And,
oh, yeah.
And then you were using the Digitech DSP-21. And I remember you saying, you said they made this thing right, and then they went and changed it. And you said, now I'm just buying them used so I have backups because you like that piece so much. And I think in the world that we live in and the integrity that seems to go away, it's that is a nice little piece to hear somebody at your stature to give that claim, because me and Jeff both know we've heard the stories of guys that just all they're worried about is just getting the endorsement, but they're not faithful to the company. If the next company comes by, they'll jump ship. And that was one of the things that stuck with me. I mean, your playing is insane. It's just unbelievable. But that piece was like, that's a really
integrity.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to spread the word that way, because the guy making the stuff has got, he's got to make a living too, and Jeff, this because you being an amp builder, it's, you want those people to be with you for a reason. And that's sure. Really nice, to hear that. But 10 sets of frets,
we've all seen plenty of ads where, you know the guy's not playing that live.
Exactly.
And that's it's kind of meaningless, at that point.
I actually had a guitarist tell me that said, yeah, this is my new signature thing. Of course, I use a fill in the blank backstage. That's
just not
right.
That I'm really playing through.
Wow.
And, that's kind of jaw dropping to me.
Yeah. So any with Purple and the Angle, any pedals between the guitar and the amp?
Yeah,
okay.
My pedals that I use all the time are the TC Flashback Delays, and they allow you to make your own preset of the parameters, including modulation.
Nice.
So
cool.
I was able to make exactly what I wanted, and it works for the short delay and the long delay. So it's called a tone print, and you can just download it from the internet or design it with their software.
And it comes from your phone, right? You can play it through the pickup, right? Isn't that what?
Yes.
That is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. That's the easiest way to load it. In fact, is
through that.
It plays. It goes through the pickup into the pedal. Anyway, I use those, and I love the fact they have dry only or dry kill switch, little dip switches inside, and true bypass, so I can get 100% wet through those, which works perfectly for my purposes. And also the reverb pedal, the Hall of Fame reverb, which I love, and they let me design a reverb sound which also has modulation in it.
Cool.
Which I'm very glad about. And I used to have some very expensive cantankerous Lexicon stuff in a rack that was doing what these pedals do in a tiny little pedal board. So I'm really stoked about that. And for some stuff, I use the Keeley compressor.
Okay.
And the Flash or the Polytune TC tuner.
Oh, nice. That's the one you can hit all 6 strings and tune them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I do one string at a time.
Yes.
For the clarity, and my eyes aren't that great from it.
Whose are anymore?
Right. Man, that's
man.
It doesn't get a whole lot more simplistic than that, Just a couple of basic pedals, a guitar and an amp, and 10
Steve
awesome
Morse
fingers.
hands.
There you go. That is really cool.
Well, there are some things in the studio that can really help out. Like recently, I got a radial. It's almost like a cross between a power soak and a speaker simulator that goes between the amp and the cabinet, and you can change, sort of the sound and even, shape the sound a good bit and sort of use that as in place of a microphone.
Mm-hmm. And depending on how the sound man feels about it, maybe bringing that on the road for him to use. But I also like the having several different mics on the cabinet when I record to get some variety, and there's a sound when you have 2 mics fighting a little bit with each other that you can't get any other way.
So you're still a guy that moves air in the studio. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, we always ask that because some people are totally virtual nowadays, and some people it's like, no, man, I got to play an amp.
Oh, I have to change something when I'm doing a recording or making an album. I just have to. I change something on every sound, so that one thing is so that I can't go back and redo a section of a part. In other words, so I'll be sort of committed to what I've recorded. And sometimes, a lot of times, I put delay and stuff on the parts so that you can't, really mess with it later.
Huh.
How about that?
And
That's
so
pretty cool.
That's like the exact opposite of what most people would do. It's
they go, I run a dry signal so I can reamp it later.
Yeah, don't touch anything in case we have to fix 90% of this later.
Exactly.
Wow. That's commitment. That's ultimate commitment right there.
Well, but back in the day when we used to bounce tracks, you would have only a few tracks to deal with, and you'd have to combine all these his chorus of guitars down to a stereo, including the clean guitar or whatever. And yeah, you have to decide on what your mix is going to be of the all these tracks that you're combining. Mm-hmm. So it's something I'm pretty used to.
That's very cool. Now speaking of recording, new Dregs?
No, it's a tour right now, and
nothing new yet. Okay,
we got the door open for possibly doing something recording wise in the future. But right now it's a tour, and there's like 1,000 dates in 1,001 days, with like 800 miles between some shows.
Oh, great routing, yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of those gumball rally races, across the.
Oh man, don't you love that?
So I want to go back to one thing, and that's the 10 sets of frets on that guitar. So that tells me, that were you just experimenting, or were you wearing them down? Because I remember one set you said was porcelain. You said that was just garbage. It was a cool concept, but it didn't work.
That was on my Strat, Telly, Brancatelli.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then
that didn't work.
Then you said you ended up. I think you're using stainless now, right? Stainless on the Ernie ball? Okay.
But actually, it's another neck. Right now, my original number one neck has. I don't know what to do because it wore down enough from all the fret replacements, and each time they have to plane the fretboard a little bit. That. It's getting too thin on top. I'm afraid if we do it again, it's going to start, the inlays and everything are going to start coming out because they're really paper thin right now.
Wow.
So I asked them for a similar neck, and they gave it to me with, and Tommy, my guitar tech, he wanted to try the stainless. And so far they're holding up.
Yeah, they'll hold up for a while.
Yeah,
they will.
Yeah. They get a little pingy, because it's a harder metal.
It is. It is noticeably got a slightly different sound.
Yeah, and I sold. Well, I didn't sell. Me and Jeff. He gave me a Buddha head from the old days, and I gave him a Les Paul. And when I had the Les Paul refretted, I used Jescar frets, which are harder than harder than Dunlop, but softer than stainless steel. They're kind of in the middle. Yeah. And I put railroad tracks on there. They're like 6100s, jumbo, and it made that guitar have that kind of, I don't know, Jeff. What would you say? You can hear that, right? It's got a little bit of that. You can definitely
hear it. Yeah, you can definitely hear it. I may have them swapped out at some point in time because I thought I liked big frets, but I'm starting to like them just a little bit smaller nowadays.
That was because I wanted to do all the fast stuff, and that really helps. For me at least, that you can have such a lighter touch. It's not so much rock and roll as it is a little speed thing, but. Yeah, I noticed it there, so I imagine stainless is much more, that brighter or pink.
Yeah, these are definitely brighter, and stainless is, because I've played guitars with stainless, and they're definitely brighter than these as well. But, who knows, I mean, they wear like iron.
Yeah, that's
they wear like stainless. They wear like stainless,
exactly.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe a change in the nut and a change in the bridge material, might compensate for that. I don't know.
Can do, because
let's not go that far.
Well, Guthrie Govan, his guitar comes stock with stainless, because he was talking about like all the things that wore out. So he used composite nuts. He used all this stuff. He ended up going with bone because that was the toughest material. And then he doesn't even use a standard like fulcrum type bridge. He uses an original Floyd Rose without the tuners, with the fine tuners, because he doesn't have a locking nut. He uses the bone, and then he has locking gears. Okay. And, he was talking about how these are all the things, but my God, the jazz tones he can get out of that guitar are amazing. And I'm like, man, what do they do with that pickup? You know, they must have put something on it, you know, to darken them up because, you know, I do hear the difference, you know. With
you can do all sorts. You can change magnets.
Sure, yeah, you can do everything.
Amazing player. Amazing player.
Yeah, I just wonder where that spaceship landed.
Well, I don't know. I thought the same thing when I first, heard the first Dregs,
exactly.
Man. So, Steve is in the same, it's on the same page in my book. So
the whole
Steve, you said touring, like 1,000 dates and 1,001 days. When do you start? Where do you start? Is it worldwide? Is it just U.S.?
Well, we're starting. It's U.S. We're starting in Florida in a couple weeks, and going up the eastern seaboard, and then over to Chicago, short break, and then Milwaukee, Des Moines, Boulder, West Coast, then back through Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Atlanta again, Memphis, Atlanta, I think, and then that's it.
Anything in Maryland?
Yeah, we're right near there. I think after Durham, we're playing that area near DC. I don't have it memorized, but
yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll find the itinerary. We'll
find out. Yeah, may have to make a trip there. Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. If possible, we'll come by and say hi and check out an awesome show. I'm sure.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah, sure.
Wilmington, Delaware, Washington, Lincoln Theater, Durham, Carolina Theater, then Collingwood, New Jersey, Newton, New Jersey, Secaucus, New Jersey, Port Chester, New York.
A lot of dates in Jersey. Cool.
Yeah, man.
Ridgefield, Connecticut.
Yeah, that's a little truck. But
Woodstock, New Hampshire, Boston, Albany, Pittsburgh. Just there's a lot
nice.
Of
You're gonna need a new bus.
For sure.
Actually, Andy and I are not going on the bus because we can't sleep on the bus, and it just.
Oh wow.
We're going to have to drive and sleep very little in hotel rooms.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a torture session in a lot of ways. Logistically.
I think it's time to get the pilot's license back out.
Get that prop check going.
There you go.
Yeah, it makes me wish I still had the twin. Yeah.
Wow.
So.
But man, I'm sure it's going to be grueling, but I'm sure it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah, musically, definitely.
Right. Where's home right now?
I live in North Central Florida.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Andy lives in Phoenix.
So the
Rod's
tour
up in New York.
Oh wow! But the tour is starting in Florida, so that's probably easiest for you. That's cool.
Everybody lives in a different state. Everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it happens after all these years.
Yeah. It's hard to get together and rehearse. Yeah. I'll meet you in Kansas.
There you go.
Wow.
Very nice.
Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And did we not touch on anything that you need to touch on, Steve? I know you said there's no new Dregs stuff coming out.
Well, on this tour, we're going to be playing a couple tunes we never played live before.
Ah.
And one of the sort of production numbers is day 444, and also another one where it grows out of a duet with classical guitar and violin. Another one called Go for Baroque, with it turns out with all four of us playing at the end of that, and then a good bit of counterpoint. And these are album tracks that we recorded but never did live, and so we're really sort of going for it.
Wow, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
so things that nobody has ever seen before. Oh, for sure. For sure. That's awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so very much for taking so much of your time with us, and we really do appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
everybody, if the Dregs are coming through your town, do yourself a favor, go see them.
Yeah.
Go see them.
You're not going to see. Yeah.
Just go.
That's
just
it.
Buy a ticket.
Yeah, there's no arguing. You just got to go.
Right.
That might be the only time to see it too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't squander your opportunity. Get some tickets, and support. Well, as we always say, support live music.
Yeah, man.
Go out and see it. Just go out and see it. And if there happens to be some new stuff coming out at the end of it, because everybody's really nice and happy and in a writing mode again, well, maybe we'll see some new Dregs, and that would be awesome too.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So, Steve, thank you. Like I said, thank you very much again for your time. Have a great rest of the evening. Great. I'm sure there'll be some rehearsals happening soon. So great rehearsals. Great and safe tour, man. Safe travels, and we hope there's a huge interest in people going out to see the Dregs again, because that's it's one hell of a band.
Yeah, man.
Wow, thank you so much, guys, and hopefully you see you on the road.
Absolutely, man. If you're around, we'll touch base with you and stop by, say hi, and hopefully get to see the show.
Yes, sir.
All right, great.
Cool,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you again, Steve. Have a great evening. And there you have the story.
How freaking awesome was that?
Man, it's like,
man.
Okay, you're in a couple of really great bands, but they just called me, decided to have me sit in with Skinner for a while. It's like, okay.
The level. If anybody out there listening that hasn't heard anything from Steve, you've got to listen to it, because the level of playability that man has is it's off the chart. He does things on the guitar that just mind-boggling. And I don't mean he's not, it's not shredding. He does these right-hand techniques where he does these false harmonics, where he, travels. He does these arpeggios where he's using his index finger to just rest on the top of the string, plucking with his thumb, but he's pulling it at the 24th fret or at, whatever corresponding fret
now
it would
it's 22s because he doesn't like 24s.
That's true. So he's estimating where that harmonic is.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And the clarity and the execution is absolutely unbelievable.
That's what, that's the first thing that really caught my ear with early Dregs. It's like it's the articulation and
oh my God.
The clarity of execution, and it's like he's tracking violin lines, he's tracking keyboard lines, and it's it was great prog, because it was early prog, and it was like this is awesome, man. This is a guitar player whose dexterity is ridiculously good, and he can follow this, and he was, and like I said, he was the first person that I had heard that sounded like that.
Oh yeah.
So exactly. It was, man, what a pleasure to finally get to speak to him after all these years.
Man?
It's great.
How about
that was great.
I tell you what, this is awesome.
It's a good day in A&A land.
Because and I'll say this, and then we'll finish up. But to finally talk to Steve, and you knew, and I knew it because I took that. I went to that clinic. No jerk. He's not a jerk at all.
No.
That guy is the most salt of the earth dude that you could ever meet, and just so honest and just so humble. It's like that's the way everybody should be. Everybody should be that way, man. We'd never have another war if people were like that.
That's true. And the fact that music heals all. So,
oh my God. And that guy is a master.
It's a good thing.
Oh, Jesus. And he's giving praise. He's giving praise to John Petrucci and Guthrie, and it's like, you're Steve Morse.
You were there first.
Those guys would have had nothing to look at to be able to do what they're doing today.
Nothing to build upon,
Exactly.
Right.
Wow. I'm going to go get in the car and play some Dregs, buddy.
Nice.
So until next time, my friend,
That's right, 'cause you don't know who we're going to drag out.
Who the hell are we going to top with that one? I'm Mick Marcelino.
That's right, you are, because I'm Jeff Bober.
And we are always saying,
onward.
Be sure and follow the show on Twitter at Amps and Axes. Also, make sure you like the show on Facebook. For news, comments, and everything else, visit the webpage, ampsandaxescast.com. Thanks for listening.